The Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star, affectionately known to its pilots as the T-Bird, represents one of the most iconic and enduring aircraft of the early jet age. Born from the dawn of jet-powered flight, the T-33 became more than just a machine. It became the foundation upon which the United States Air Force and many other air forces around the world built the next generation of jet fighter pilots. To truly understand the impact of the T-33, one must first look back to the late 1940s, a time when aviation technology was evolving faster than ever before. Propeller-driven fighters had reached their limits during World War II, and the introduction of the jet engine changed everything. Lockheed, already a major player in military aircraft production, had developed the P-80 Shooting Star, the first operational jet fighter for the United States. The P-80 was fast, sleek, and modern, but it was also a handful for pilots who had grown up flying piston-engine aircraft. These early jets were far less forgiving, and many pilots transitioning from World War II-era fighters like the P-51 Mustang or P-47 Thunderbolt found the change intimidating. Lockheed's chief designer, Clarence Kelly Johnson, one of the most brilliant engineers of the 20th century, understood that the Air Force needed a dedicated training platform, something that could safely introduce pilots to the world of jet propulsion, high-speed aerodynamics, and new flight dynamics. The result was the T-33, a simple yet elegant solution. Take the proven F-80 airframe and stretch it just enough to add a second seat, one for the instructor and one for the student. From that small modification emerged an aircraft that would train tens of thousands of pilots and remain in service for decades. The first T-33 prototype took to the skies on March 22, 1948. Almost immediately, it demonstrated everything the Air Force had hoped for. It retained the strong performance and stability of the F-80 while adding the safety and versatility of dual controls. Pilots could now make mistakes, learn, and recover, all with the help of an instructor sitting right behind them. The T-33 quickly became the U.S. Air Force's standard jet trainer and was officially designated the T-33 Shooting Star. What followed was a production run that lasted longer than anyone expected. Lockheed built thousands of them, and many were produced under license in other countries such as Canada, where it was called the CT-133 Silver Star, and Japan, where Kawasaki manufactured it domestically. This simple, robust, and easy-to-maintain aircraft became a global workhorse. The T-33 was powered by the Allison J33A35 turbojet engine, which produced about 5,400 pounds of thrust. This engine gave the aircraft a maximum speed of around 600 miles per hour, making it fast enough to simulate the experience of real jet combat without being too dangerous for training. It could climb to nearly 48,000 feet and had a range of about 1,275 miles. For student pilots in the late 1940s and 1950s, these numbers were thrilling. The cockpit layout was clean and logical, and because it had two sets of controls, instructors could take over instantly if something went wrong. That dual cockpit design saved many lives during the early years of the jet age. Pilots who trained on the T-33 often describe it as a beautifully balanced machine, stable, smooth, and forgiving but still capable of demanding respect. Its straight wings gave it predictable handling characteristics, while its aerodynamic simplicity made it reliable and easy to maintain. For ground crews, the T-33 was a dream compared to later jets. It used conventional construction techniques, and spare parts were easy to replace. It was the kind of aircraft that just worked. In the air, it taught students everything they needed to know about jet flight: high-speed approaches, rapid climb rates, jet engine throttle management, and advanced maneuvers. The T-33 could even perform light aerobatics, helping students experience G-forces and coordination at jet speeds. One of the most remarkable things about the T-33 was how adaptable it was. Though designed purely as a trainer, it was later modified into several versions that performed different roles. The RT-33A variant was equipped with cameras for reconnaissance missions. The DT-33A was used for drone control operations, while the AT-33A was a light attack version armed with machine guns, rockets, and bombs. This flexibility allowed smaller nations to use the T-33 not only as a trainer but as a frontline aircraft when needed. In countries like Indonesia, Thailand, and Turkey, the T-33 was often seen carrying weapons under its wings, ready for light combat duties or border patrol missions. Its ability to adapt made it invaluable, especially during the Cold War when air forces around the world needed affordable, reliable jets. In the United States, the T-33 became a symbol of the transition to the jet age. It was used by both the Air Force and the Navy, serving as a bridge between propeller-driven trainers and supersonic fighters like the F-86 Sabre and F-100 Super Sabre. Every pilot who flew jets during the 1950s likely spent hundreds of hours in a T-33. It wasn't glamorous or fast compared to combat aircraft, but it was trustworthy. It could take off from rough runways, handle a variety of weather conditions, and provide an ideal learning platform. Internationally, the T-33's story is just as impressive. Canada produced its own variant, the CT-133 Silver Star, under license by Canadair. The Silver Star trained generations of Royal Canadian Air Force pilots and even performed in the Snowbirds aerobatic team before they switched to the Connecticut 114 Tudor. Japan, rebuilding its air defense capabilities after World War II, produced its own T-33s under license from Lockheed, allowing Japanese pilots to transition smoothly into modern jets like the F-86F and later the F-104J Starfighter. Indonesia, too, operated the T-33 as a mainstay of its training fleet, where it became an important symbol of modernization during the early years of the Indonesian Air Force. Across Latin America, Asia, and Europe, the T-33 served faithfully. In some nations, it remained in frontline service until the late 1990s or even early 2000s. Countries such as Bolivia, Honduras, and Guatemala kept their T-33s flying long after the aircraft had been retired elsewhere, proving just how durable and reliable the design truly was. Even when replacement parts became scarce, dedicated technicians kept these aircraft operational, often rebuilding engines or airframes by hand. In terms of flying characteristics, the T-33 was considered a pilot's airplane. It responded smoothly to inputs and didn't surprise the pilot with sudden stalls or aggressive behavior. The J-33 engine required careful throttle management, as early turbojets were slower to respond than modern ones, but once mastered, the T-33 offered a graceful flying experience. Pilots could practice formation flying, air combat maneuvers, and instrument approaches. For many, the first solo flight in a T-33 was a moment of pride, the step from propeller aircraft into the realm of jets. The aircraft's design simplicity also made it ideal for upgrades. Some nations modernized their T-33s with new avionics, improved seats, and even upgraded engines. The cockpit, though basic by modern standards, provided excellent visibility thanks to its bubble canopy. The seating arrangement placed the instructor slightly higher than the student, giving him a clear view forward. During flight, both cockpits had full flight controls, and communication between instructor and trainee was maintained through an intercom system. Maintenance was one of the biggest strengths of the T-33. Built using strong and straightforward engineering principles, the aircraft was easy to service in the field. Mechanics could remove panels quickly, and the engine could be swapped in a matter of hours. This made the T-33 particularly suitable for air forces with limited budgets or infrastructure. Lockheed's design philosophy emphasized practicality, and it paid off. The T-33 was not only effective but economical. The sheer number of aircraft produced, over 6,500 worldwide, speaks to its success. Few military jets have reached that level of production. The T-33's widespread use also made it a familiar sight at air bases across the globe. Pilots in Canada, Japan, Brazil, and Italy all shared stories about flying the same machine. That global connection made the T-33 something of an ambassador for the early jet age, representing American aerospace engineering at its finest. During the Cold War, the T-33 also played a small but interesting role in reconnaissance and defense operations. Modified RT-33s were used by several countries to photograph border regions or enemy installations. Some of these missions were classified, particularly those conducted by U.S. allies. The aircraft's relatively small radar signature and steady flight characteristics made it well suited for aerial reconnaissance. In Latin America, the T-33 was even involved in a few air-to-air skirmishes. For example, during the 1960s, Cuban and Venezuelan T-33s saw limited combat use, demonstrating that even a trainer could hold its own in certain situations. In civilian life, the T-33 also found new purpose. Many were sold to private owners after retirement and converted into warbirds. Today, a number of T-33s still fly in airshows across the United States and Europe. Their smooth lines and vintage jet sound captivate audiences. Airshow pilots often describe the T-33 as one of the most enjoyable classic jets to fly. Responsive yet not too demanding, powerful enough to impress but gentle enough to handle with ease. Its engine emits that classic early jet whine, a nostalgic reminder of the 1950s. As technology advanced, newer jet trainers began to replace the T-33. Aircraft such as the Cessna T-37 Tweet, Northrop T-38 Talon, and later the Bay Hawk and Aero L-39 Albatross offered higher performance, modern avionics, and lower operating costs. By the 1980s, the T-33 had largely been phased out of active U.S. service. However, its influence was still felt everywhere. The training methods, flight techniques, and safety protocols developed during the T-33 era shaped jet pilot instruction for decades. Even after retirement, the T-33 continued to serve in limited roles as a test platform. NASA and several defense contractors used modified T-33s for testing new radar systems, flight instruments, and experimental equipment. These aircraft proved ideal because they were stable, predictable, and had ample room for modifications. The T-33 was, in essence, a flying laboratory. Culturally, the T-33 became a symbol of progress and modernization. In post-war Japan, for example, seeing a T-33 flying over a rebuilt Tokyo was a visible sign that the nation had entered a new technological era. In Canada, it symbolized the country's independent aerospace industry. In Indonesia, it represented strength and self-reliance, as the country sought to build a capable air force in the 1950s and 60s. Across every continent, wherever it flew, the T-33 carried with it a legacy of optimism and learning. Decades after its first flight, the aircraft still inspires admiration. Museums around the world preserve T-33s as proud exhibits. Visitors can walk up to one, look into its cockpit, and imagine what it must have been like to be a young pilot in the early days of the jet age, feeling that rush of speed for the first time. The sound of the Allison J-33 engine spooling up must have been exhilarating, an unmistakable roar that signaled a new chapter in aviation history. What makes the T-33 truly remarkable, however, is not just its longevity or production numbers, but the human stories behind it. For every T-33 built, there are countless pilots who took their first jet flight in one, instructors who guided nervous students through takeoffs and landings, and ground crews who kept the aircraft running day after day. The T-33 was more than a machine. It was a mentor, a stepping stone, and a bridge between generations of aviation technology. Today, when enthusiasts and historians talk about the golden age of jet training, the T-33 inevitably takes center stage. It embodied everything that made early jet aviation exciting: innovation, simplicity, and elegance. It trained pilots who would go on to fly supersonic fighters, conduct space missions, and lead air forces. It was the silent teacher behind every great pilot of its era. Even though it lacked radar-guided missiles or high-tech avionics, it possessed something more important: balance, reliability, and character. If one looks at modern trainer aircraft today, such as the T-6 Texan II or the T-7A Red Hawk, their design philosophy still traces its roots back to the T-33. The concept of a tandem-seat jet trainer with simple, durable systems remains a cornerstone of pilot education. Lockheed's creation from 1948 laid the groundwork for all that followed. Many T-33s still exist in flying condition today, carefully maintained by private collectors and heritage organizations. Watching one take off is like stepping back in time. The sound, the shape, and the feeling are pure nostalgia for aviation lovers. At airshows across the United States, Canada, and Europe, the T-33 continues to remind audiences of the transition between propeller-driven warbirds and modern jets. It bridges two worlds: the romantic past of piston fighters and the sleek future of high-speed aviation. In essence, the Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star is not merely an aircraft but a symbol of progress. It stands as one of the most successful jet trainers in aviation history, serving for over half a century and touching the skies of more than 30 nations. It is a story of engineering brilliance, international cooperation, and human ambition. The fact that it remains admired today, decades after its first flight, proves that great designs never truly fade, they simply evolve into legend. The T-33 was built to teach men how to fly jets, but in doing so, it taught the world how to master the future of flight itself.